What's up, guys? This is Moses Dolo here with the new episode for Tradition and Modern Talks. I just hope you guys had a good week, and I hope you guys looking forward to this new episode. Guys, I had to go get somebody I found on YouTube. This guy was a very influencing guy in some unique conversations I've heard on YouTube. I heard him during the Christmas break when I was delivering packages for my job. And I thought this guy has some great insight that I had to bring on the show to help explain some things dealing with a relationship. And he's actually from Vancouver, Canada. And he also has a counselor set. Well, I guess you could say a marriage counseling session, what he does. And also he does great work with people in relationships to understand both sides of the sex, to understand what makes a relationship work, and also understanding what's the situation. Guys, without further ado, I want to introduce you guys to the myth, the man, the legend, the one and only Rocky Lee. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Moses. Wow, that was quite the introduction. Thank you so much for that.
No, thank you. Appreciate you coming on. This is an opportunity that's an honor because I think you have a great inspirational understanding and unique view that many don't speak on in America, especially with the counseling you do in Vancouver. So, first thing I want to ask you, what is your, where are you from originally in your nationality, and how old are you?
Yeah, so I am from Hong Kong and basically immigrated to Canada in 1973. So a lot of years back. So I'm pretty much Canadian. Let's
Okay.
let's put it that way. So
Yes, sir.
yeah,
Okay.
and so I'm
Awesome.
53 years old.
Okay. My dad's 74. So don't worry. You're better. You're doing better. Trust me. Well, my pops, he just, he's 74, but he passed. So he lived his life the best he could. But
I
I'm thankful.
heard that. Yeah, sorry to
Yeah.
hear that.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. My dad, he went through a lot, but he got through the life. He lived all the way to 70, which
Mm,
is good. So I hope everybody gets to see examples like that to live long too. So
yes.
yes, that's the goal, to continue to live long life and longevity. Yeah, and Rocky, I just also want to know, with your background being in Canada and also an Asian descent, with this background you have, going to this field, what made you become a counselor for relationships? I'm curious about that because I heard about that on different podcasts. If you're talking about that, so I'm curious, what made you go into that?
Oh man, it's a bit of a long story, so I'll break it down in a short way. I've always been interested in relationships, in particular human behavior and how we connect and build community, much like you, Christian background. And originally, I was heading into ministry.
Mhm.
And what I found was that, okay, so let me explain this. I originally wanted to be a youth pastor,
Mhm.
and it's well, being a youth pastor is kind of like being a magician. So you get kids dropped off to you and you have to do the magic trick and get their lives straightened out. And so what happens is you do that and then you send them back home and they end up getting back into the same patterns and habits only because the parents aren't actually doing things in their lives to change and alter their patterns and behaviors. So the kids keep repeating that process. And I think this would probably be the same cry as all youth pastors, is it's a daunting journey to go through that process. What I realized is, man, if I was going to get this next generation, the best place to get them would be in prenatal, when they were
Mhm.
in the mom's womb.
Yes.
And so the idea is, what if I impacted the parents first,
Mhm.
and then through that help them come to a place where they can impact their children's lives? So that actually became the start of the journey. And as I was doing ministry, I had some opportunities to work with some couples, and these couples were dear friends of mine, and their marriages ended, and I was confused by this process because, typically in a Christian church and even Roman Catholic churches, you do premarital counseling, and then there's, you know, counseling services and support that's given within a church structure, but their marriage still ended up in divorce, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. So I ended up doing my own research, created kind of like my ultimate premarital counseling course, and I field tested it, and it was working.
Mhm.
And then I realized that at some point there was a juncture where people were having a problem. So people would just make a decision to get into a relationship, or they would be stuck trying to decide, should I get into this relationship? So I
Yes.
realized that there actually had to be work involved in helping singles come to a quicker and a better and a healthier process of discovering who they should marry. And I figured that, hey, look, if they can do that, then a lot of the problems that they end up with in marriage, it actually wouldn't show up.
Right.
So this whole process is very much a passion project for me. It's something that I care deeply about. I care deeply about kids. And because of that, I care deeply about family structure. So in a long-winded way, that's kind of how I got to what I'm doing.
No, it's actually you said it pretty clear. It's right to the next question, which is pretty clear. Thank you for explaining that, and that I appreciate your time taking this to say it all and be honest, because it goes back to that foundation, like you said, family, and
Yeah.
it goes to my next question that says, many don't seem to understand relationship in 2023, which you kind of answered it because you said they drop their kids to the church, and also they don't never change the family dynamic at home. This where it
Yeah.
starts. Yeah, and I think that's a problem because I agree. It's with the family. The parents have to change, and I think there's a saying that goes, "Hurting people hurt people."
Yeah.
It's usually with parents. Unfortunately, that's the truth. That parents hurt their children in some type of way mentally, and it's like the saying in the Bible. If you know the scripture, which you're probably sure you know, it says, "Parents, do not provoke your child to wrath."
Mm-hmm.
And that's anger. And I can speak on that because my parents, rest in peace to my father, but I had dealt with that aggression from my parents, and my mother was like, and my dad was super aggressive. And it's like, that's not something you push on your kids, because that aggression provokes them to wrath and
Yeah.
anger. And that makes that projects it to somewhere else, to someone else to take that wrath, and that doesn't understand, like, why is such and such is so angry, because there's some wrath at home that's being pushed onto them from the parent, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. What do you
Yeah.
think about that?
Yeah. Let me speak into that for a second. I'm glad you brought that point up, Moses. Here's the reality with relationships. What we are not taught in the world is that um, everybody that we cross paths with, they are our mirror. So in a relationship context, my wife, she lives out as a mirror of my very, very strong fears and insecurities.
Okay.
That's just the way it works. We just don't realize that that's just the way it works. And so a part of the breakdown process in people entering into relationships in 2023 and even before and coming into the years ahead of us, a lot of the misnomer is that they don't realize that a relationship is meant to foster up and expose and trigger all our fears and insecurities. And
Wow.
so when we don't see it that way, we take everything that we're triggered by and we put it in as a projection, a
Mm.
blame onto our partner. And yes, there are things that our partner should be improving in. Yes, there are things that they need to deal with themselves. But the reason why I'm getting triggered by my wife is really not because of my wife. It's actually because of me. It's my own fears, my own triggers. So my wife is actually mirroring my greatest fears and insecurities.
Yes.
And I'm doing the same thing, right? So it's not like it's a one-way street. It's that both of us are actually doing this. And it was designed that way. And the reason is because we don't see our blind spots.
Right.
That's the tension. We think we do. We think we understand ourselves. And I think through time, as we do inner work and deep work, we start to see our shadows a little bit more. But without that external help of people that we love and trust, who love us so deep, who are willing to speak into us and hold us accountable for our reactions and help us to see where our blind spots are, we never see our blind spots. So how God created marriage is that we are basically two single individuals bringing in all our baggage, all our fear, all our insecurities, and we trigger each other. And so without my wife, I could not be the man that I am now. And I
Mm.
cannot be the man that I want to be, because it's my wife that actually helps expose where I'm not showing up as that person, and vice versa. My wife cannot be the woman that she wants to be without my help, because it's within my help that I speak out into her where her blind spots are. And when we do that for each other and we see that it was done out of love and it's done out of a lot of grace and it's done out of a desire to better each other, then we surrender to that process and healing takes place. So this is, for me, one of the primary reasons why in relationships in our modern day age, they're breaking down right now, because we don't understand fundamentally that this is what this journey is about. And so what we've been shared to by media, it's not that it's wrong. It's that it's only mirroring for us what the dating stage was. That's it. And so it's very seldom that we see a movie where a couple actually is shown where they're working through their issues and they're surrendering to this process and they're cleaning up things that need to be cleaned up, or they're sharing where they're impacted. We don't ever see that side of the picture. Make sense?
Yeah.
And we typically we see people who have gone through the work, but we think of it as, oh man, they're amazing. It must have been awesome to just show up and they were ready for it. How magical was that? But we don't realize that behind the scenes, they spent years and years and years and years of help, of mentorship, of discipleship, of counseling and therapy, and all the help that we weren't privy to. Right. So we see that as kind of like, oh, that was so magical, but why is my marriage like not working out? So that's the tension, is that the viewpoint of how we see marriage is completely skewed.
I remember you speaking on a show in the past. It was like several years ago. It was a good show. You were saying people always wonder why someone else's grass is greener. And I think you said, or the lady said, one of you guys said, because they're watering it and taking care of it, that's why theirs is greener. But people focus on other people's grass, and that's not good. So it's like, how do you expect your grass to look good, but you're trying to look at others, but not work on your own?
Yeah.
You know? And that was a good point you made, because I think there's a problem in the church, which I won't go into details because that's a long conversation for another day. But there's a lot of misunderstanding about how people should see marriage. But the problem is, we live in a time where we've seen a lot of prosperity gospel and a lot of people pushing tithe more, but don't have no results for the people to get better. Whereas I think churches should be working more on the singles. Like you said, start with the home, right?
Yeah.
If the singles are older in the church, why aren't they having singles ministries to make them better people for the future spouse? Where people in the church, which I'm a single, I've seen different Christian women pursue the people outside the church more than the men in the church, because the men are not masculine to be like the man they should be, because the Bible says we are the leaders of the family. Christ says the head of the house, right? Because Christ is the example. But now today, media shows this is masculinity, because the hyper masculinity is the way the media shows men that are men. Like that's not really the ideal man, but that's what they're showing. But the church is not doing that work to show the man of God who he should be, because all they're seeing is the pastor as the real man of God. But that man of God has to he only teaches the word. He's not the man for everybody. That's just one man, and I think that's an issue. Are you seeing more people satisfied with relationships so far, or are you just been seeing people unsatisfied in your work, which you've been doing so far, Mr. Rocky?
Yeah. So I see more and more people like dissatisfied in their relationships, both singles and couples. I work with both. What I am seeing is a greater hunger. There's a yearning for something more. But people don't know what that means, because there's not a lot of voices out there that are articulating what more means. So typically we have on the internet, we have a lot of people who are date coaches. So they talk heavily about the process of actually attracting somebody, getting into a date, but it's almost like separate from the marriage journey. Whereas I don't believe it's separate. It's one and of the whole journey.
Right.
And so this is why I think that our approach in our modern age is a little off, because we're heavily focused on the whole love and attraction and how to get somebody, but there's no connection as to like, wait, does this person even fit for marriage? That's the tension part. So for me, I find that people are starting to hunger and yearn for more of that. It's just that there's no content that's supporting that. There's no scaffolding out there that helps people begin to identify, oh, this is what more really means. outside of the realm of dating. And this is why like marriage is so important, because without marriage, love is a transactional process,
Yes.
right? So marriage is the only thing that basically kind of like sets this plumb line in place where my love for my wife is not predicated upon whether I feel it or not.
Yes.
My love for my wife is predicated upon my choice every morning to wake up and choose to love her. And we don't have that mental mindset for marriage. And so we approach single dating relationships with the same mindset. And that's why it doesn't ever translate into actually marriage.
Yes. I definitely, man, I feel what you just said. That really hit home because it's a lot of bad view on what marriage is based on the culture. And I mean, America, I'm not gonna lie, Miss Rocky, it's getting to a point where we see so many couples
Yeah.
divorcing, and it's like this is a statistic in America.
Yep.
70 to 80% of our women file for divorce,
That's right.
and it goes to irreconcilable differences, which is what does that mean? And that means happiness, which is always the case. I'm not happy, Moses. I'm not happy, Brad. I'm not happy, Lee. It's happiness that is not contingent on marriage,
Yep.
because this fairy tale is what's taken over, and it makes them believe this is what really what marriage is, because if happiness is in fluctuating,
Yeah.
it's never that. But the thing is, how can I say it, how can I put it? It's like for example, you know, a lotus flower. A
Yeah.
lotus flower, if you don't know, this is true. I just read this just now before we came on the show. A lotus flower takes 3 days to come out. And I thought about that. It has, because the lotus flower is surrounded by dirt. And many don't know lotus flower toxins clean around it to keep the dirt away from it to make it clean.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's kind of like going back to the word of God. We need God to clean us every day.
Mm-hmm.
We need to go back to what it says in Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Be transformed by the renewal of your mind. And God is so clear about that. We have to renew our minds daily, because he said this world is not our home, of course, but it's getting to a point where we're going to see a lot of things attack us, to the point where we have to now decide if we're going to be a part of something every day. We can say no or yes, you know, and it's getting evil, you know, in these times. But we have to understand, God will always see us through if we trust his plan, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we got to be careful. We have time to learn, but we can't waste our time with the wrong people who are going to divide our marriage, for our relationship, for the family, because that is the
Yeah.
foundation for God is family. So into my next question, as we say in this conversation, what do you think people can do now and improve? I'm on 4. It says, if anything you can think to change or improve on relationships, what people can work on, because I've heard a lot of different conversations on people making bad narrative about marriage, like if you say submission means slavery,
Right.
or or better yet, they say, my husband is my partner, which you said this in your other show, which I wanted to
Yeah.
bring it up after I bring this up first. So that'd be second. But what do you think about that word submission in marriage? Because I think that's a big misunderstanding.
Yeah. So it's definitely a trigger word in our
Yeah,
time and
is there?
age.
Sorry, ladies,
so
we got to talk
so
about it. We're here
yeah,
to talk
people
about
get
it.
really triggered by this. So this is how I would frame it. Okay.
Yes,
I would frame submission more of the word called trust.
trust. Yes,
And so when you think about the word trust, in our English language in North America and the Western culture, we've actually done a disservice to that word trust. And from a biblical perspective, we've actually not done really well either in helping us understand, why is God trustworthy? How do we lean into God or Christ as trustworthy? We've not really done well in unpacking that as a church, but let's talk from the realm of relationships about what trust is. So what we're used to is a working relationship. So if you're my boss and I work for you, Moses, there is an agreement that you and I have surrounded ourselves under. And that agreement helps us define our working relationship and the goal of that working relationship, right? So that goal would be, I come in, I work X amount of hours, I help you produce this result. Okay, so
yes,
whatever the result is, it's irrelevant. But essentially, the working agreement is, here's the agreement, here's the contract. We're both trusting each other on this agreement, and we are essentially working towards filling that goal, right? Bringing a result to whatever that intended goal is. The problem is that in relationships, we don't have that same agreement. Our agreement in marriage is not the same as an agreement at work. Our agreement at work is predicated upon results. Our agreement within a marriage isn't about that. It's about showing up for one another and loving each other through it and helping each other become a better version. Make sense?
Yes, it does.
So the tension here is that we're translating a working environment terminology that you must earn my trust. So the earning trust only works when there is an agreement that contains that, built on the premise of a result. That's work. In a marriage relationship, I can't earn my wife's trust because it doesn't have the same container that helps that word come into a place of a result. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So in a relationship, trust is actually about understanding. Do I understand my wife enough to say that I trust you, honey, not because you're right, but just because I trust you?
Yes.
I'm married to you. Why would I not trust you? That's the difference. So when we talk about submission, what we're really talking about is, do you trust your partner that their intent for you is pure, that their decisions were made in a way that it was meant to do right by you? And that's the problem with submission, is that we don't see that conversation.
It doesn't happen. Yeah.
So
when
we enter into marriage, it's on this platform of you must earn my trust. So what happens is, because of that, I can't help but react in my carnal nature to feel like, wait, was this intent pure, or is there a hidden agenda? I can't see it because I'm still sitting on this platform of like, no, you got to earn my trust. You got to do X, Y, and Z to earn my trust. And then I will believe that your intent towards me was pure.
Yes.
That's the tension.
Gotcha. No, that sounds like you can't be selfish in most cases. You have to be selfless. It is hard. I'm not gonna lie. I've heard about the stories, people going through a lot, especially dealing with somebody that, because when you're saying you're single for so many years and now you're sharing a space with somebody you never spent time with in your life in face to face, it does have a challenge there where people think it's just like shacking is never going to work. It's just you're predetermining a relationship, but you're not really married until the government gets involved, and then something happens with that. But when you have a whole situation going where you're trying to figure it out without being committed, and someone just leaves, I mean that could tarnish the next relationship, because they project that last person to the next person. Where I always tell ladies, even dating Christian women, I tell them all the time, like, why do you feel like that towards me? And I have not done nothing critical to you as a person. And I think for all the guys who can agree to me on this, we have dealt with men, of course, have to deal with trying to be this guy that they're not to get a woman's approval to see if they would like them. We have to understand it's really not a lot of guys battling to get accepted. It's more so women choosing based on previous notion of kind of guys they accepted that weren't good. But now it's like, we're going to be these guys that were not to fit in for them. A Christian man is not a man until he's a man. He does this type of lifestyle. He's making more money. But is it really about the money, or is it about security? We're in the first world country, and it's a problem there, which I think ladies have to understand. It's not the money. It's the mindset and where he's going. If he can make all the money and treat you like trash, that tells you something, right? But the less money is not the case. It's a good guy that makes the right amount of income, and he does have the right mindset for a plan. That's the man you really want to deal with, that has the mindset. But it seems like the lifestyle is more important for all the things you can have, that's silver and gold. That doesn't really make a relationship. It's more so a cop out for saying I have the life, but I don't have a man that takes care of the problems I deal with that are important in my internal life. That's our job as the leader. We're here to protect you spiritually, mentally, emotionally, socially, and mentally. Because if you think about it, Rocky, it's really dependent on us to take care of that for the lady we choose to marry. And I think it's important to know this too. When we have kids, I've always asked ladies, and I think if you can answer this question too, I've always asked ladies, what's more important, your career or your family? And I think in America, we have an influx of independence with our ladies in America. And I
Mhm.
think that's a problem. I think we have a lot of that mindset because society pushes that to want to be alone and not have a man. But I think that's really hurting a lot of them because last year we had a lady in New York, Miss USA. Yeah, Miss USA 2021. She committed, she deleted herself
Mm.
and she jumped off the building in New York. And she didn't have no, she had a mom and dad, but she had no kids. Miss USA, PhD, lawyer, all these things. But it's like, why does someone just take their life over that kind of life they had? You had everything but a family. Why did she choose that? I think that really goes psychologically with, kids and a husband make it fulfills a woman more than a field of work for money, you know. But I'll go to the next question from there. Um, what do you advise couples to show appreciation? What do you think couples should show appreciation for their spouse? Like, how do you think they should show that if they're married? How do they show that in the marriage?
It's really simple. Like marriage is such a simple process. It's not a
Yeah.
mystery. And what I tell couples is this: your only goal is to wake up every morning and ask yourself, did I help my partner experience that I loved them more than I did yesterday?
Mm,
Did I help my partner experience that I cared about them more than I did yesterday? Like
yes,
that's as simple as it gets.
exactly. Simple. I mean, it's good way you put that. And now back to what we are talking about, partners.
Mhm.
Now, I like the way you broke it down in that one video, which was very good. That made me reach out to you. I was like, wow, you really knew what you were saying, and it made sense. Like you said, marriage is like the company, and two companies come together. Can you explain that story again if you still remember that? Because that was a
Yeah,
long time ago.
yeah, absolutely.
Thank
So
you.
how I see marriage is this. It think of it as there's a man and a woman, and they're from a business standpoint, they're a small boutique entrepreneurial business. They're completely unrelated. They're 10 blocks away from each other on the same city street, and halfway in between is Starbucks. So every day, this man and this woman, they have the same type of clientele, they have the same business, they are making the same profit, they're suffering the same loss. They both every day go to Starbucks. And over time, they suddenly meet each other. They notice that they're going to Starbucks together. They introduce each other. They start to like each other. They end up dating. And now, as they're dating each other, they're realizing, hey, let's combine efforts. Let's combine our company together. Let's buy all our product bulk. Then, we'll make more profit and hopefully we'll have less loss, and we can suffer less loss by, like, if there's a client that doesn't like my services, I'll refer them over to your company. So this is how they're helping each other. All right. So as they're doing this, their loving relationship is growing. Well, there's a larger company called Marriage Incorporated, and it's been researching them. So over time, it's been watching them, watching how they handle their business, how they handle conflict, how they handle loving each other. And it comes by and it just decides one day, listen, we want to offer both of you guys this deal. We'd like to buy you guys out. Well, this husband, I mean, this boy, this man and this woman are basically saying, hey, this is brilliant. Yes, we would love it. Buy us out. This is awesome. So Marriage Incorporated says, we'll buy you out, but only on one caveat. The caveat is this: you must stay working for us. You will both run your divisions. So your individual companies now will be run as a separate division, but within our company called Marriage Incorporated. So if you're okay to these terms, we will buy you out. So this man and this woman, they're like, this is even better than we thought. Like, we'll get bought out, and then on top of that, we're getting a paid salary, and we don't have to use any of our salary to throw back into our company. This is like, this is a win-win. This is brilliant. So this man and the woman, they agree, they get married. From that point on, the only rights that they have only exist to serve and support the incorporation of marriage. They no longer have their own individual rights. In other words, this man and this woman, if they wanted a new desk and a new chair for their desk, they just can't go out and spend the money and just take it out of their bank account. They actually have to file in a report and say, hey, do we have the budget for this? Can I get a new desk? And it gets approved up the chain of command. Well, it's there for a reason, because you're now serving that company. Your goal is to make that company better. Your goal is to bring a result for that company. Well, that's what marriage is. Marriage is this beautiful company that has bought both of these people out. This man and this woman, they bought them out. And now their sole goal is to serve that incorporation. And that's really what marriage is about. And it's beautiful when we are willing to submit to that process and elevate marriage instead of elevating ourselves.
No, wow, that's that. I gotta give you a clap for that. That is a way to perfect. That's so perfected the way you made it sound. You can't really write that to make it hard to understand. It's just like a mutual understanding of a person that you're choosing. I don't know what people are watching on TV, but you gotta really pick a person based on the value principles. You know, I think the Bible says, charm is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a God-fearing woman or man shall be praised, right? So for us to pick based on principles and godly morals, it's such a deeper meaning in that versus you make you're saying you want a man to make six figures, but have you really dealt with a six-figure man? Because they are different. They're not the type to just pick you up.
Yeah.
I'm not for that. I'm not going to promote it, but I don't believe in Christian women being sugar babies, whatever that is. That's just a
Yeah.
thing out there happening, which I'm not for that, which is like, okay, you do that, but men want to get married to women that are faithfully for them only, one woman, that's it.
Yeah.
Um,
Let
I
me
don't,
let me speak into it. Would that be okay for me to speak into this,
yeah,
Moses?
yeah,
So
please.
the where singles are struggling in the Western world is that we don't know how to define the difference between um, what I need in a healthy marriage versus who I want to marry. We don't know that. There's no distinctive value between these two things. And another way to look at it is we don't know the difference between the words commonalities versus compatibilities. All right. So let me deal with the first set of words first. So when we talk about what I need versus what I want, typically what we've been groomed to do is we want to, like, it's kind of like we've all, both men and women, as young as a child, and we've been watching movies, we've all collected a collage of our best characters and images of people that we want to marry from all the TV shows and movies and books that we've read. It's just one massive conglomeration. It's almost like in our head, we have our own Photoshop device and we're snipping off an arm here and a head here and hair here and eyes here. And we're compiling it in our perfect template in our head. Okay.
Like Voltron, pretty much like the show Voltron.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is kind of how we compile our data of who I want to marry. All right. And ironically, this is not what we need for a healthy marriage. It's just what we think we want. Okay. So an idea of this is kind of like all men, when we get invited back to our high school reunion, what kind of girl do we want to bring to that high school reunion? It is like an Angelina Jolie or some Sports Illustrated model. Like we just want like that gorgeous woman. We want to bring that to our high school reunion, right? So that we can brag and we can be like, yeah, that's right. You bullied me, but look what I got now. This is the mental mindset of every man, and in some ways, what women are thinking as well. Okay, so this is the kind of woman that we want, but that would never be the woman that we want to introduce to our mom and dad.
Mm,
See the
exactly.
distinction?
Yes, I do.
So the woman that I do want to introduce to my mom and dad, she's a completely different person.
Mm.
She has a completely different set of values. She has a completely different way of living life. And this is why we get messed up, is that we don't know what the needs are that I must have to have a healthy marriage versus who I want to marry. So now this brings us to these two words, compatibility versus commonality. So within the Christian church, the Christian singles in church struggle with this because we've not done a great job as a church in distinguishing these things. So for example, we've been taught for the most part within a global Christian church concept that if you find a Christian woman, that's awesome, marry her. The problem is being Christian is a commonality. It's not a compatible thing. Because if I am Baptist by denomination in my theology, but somebody else, this other woman is charismatic, we're not compatible now. Our theology is completely different. Does that make sense? So I might not even believe in like signs, miracles, and wonders. She might. Now, that's not compatible. So being Christian actually isn't compatible. It's a commonality. People have to drill down even more about how they want to spend time with God for them to actually define what they need in their marriage. Right now, this happens outside of the church as well. So, for example, if I was totally into running, okay, and if I meet a girl in a running club, we fall in love. We met on the premise of a commonality. Running was our common thing. Okay. The problem is that commonalities change over time. Compatibilities don't. So what if like 5 months down the road, I injure my leg and I can't run anymore? But what if our whole structure of our life was designed around running? What if our friends are all runners? The parties that we go to are runners. The networking events are all runners. Now what do? I show up to the party. I don't run anymore. Now I'm probably bitter. So commonalities is not where we want to find and build a relationship from. It's just a touch point to see where there's chemistry. But to actually see whether somebody is actually a right fit for me, I have to look into the compatible values. That's where I've got to get clear to myself. How do I define what I need in a healthy marriage, not who I want to marry? These are two very distinct qualities. And if I'm honest with myself and I define those compatible values, I will end up attracting those people in my life. As opposed to me trying to go out and I'm looking for that needle in the haystack. That's so daunting compared to that, right? So for example, if you look at California has a population size of like 34 million people. If I'm looking for that one in that sea of 34 million people, that's daunting. Like how many dates do you go through to figure that out?
One too many.
Exactly. So whereas if I come out with a profile that makes it really clear, here are the 10 qualities that I must have.
Yes.
Now, in a sea of 34 million, there might be 200 people that actually are a right fit for me. And those are the people that I will end up attracting, I'll end up looking for, and I'll end up recognizing. So people genuinely are a lot closer to the ones that they want to marry than they realize. They just don't acknowledge it because they're too busy looking for who they want to marry, not what they need in marriage.
That's true. Absolutely. No, that was a wow. Thank you for bringing that all down. That is a very insightful for you, Rocky. It's just it's sad that many are missing this point because I think there's a new thing I've been studying. It's been a lot of people speaking about getting their passports now. A lot of guys are saying it because they're tired of America.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to bash anybody from that point of view, but I think the understanding here is that a lot of men are traditional at heart. You know, we're not too modern where, you know, they say 50-50. That no woman wants a 50-50. That's sensible, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people are seeing they're wanting traditional men, but the men are saying we want a traditional woman, meaning can you be a woman that trusts me, and also can you trust me to say that I'm leading you, and if possible, if I wanted to homeschool my family, and you stay home, or better yet, if you can just put your job on part-time and just focus on the kids so we don't pay for daycare because it's expensive. Traditional values is going back to the original way, which is God's word saying, which is nothing wrong with women working. It's the Proverbs 31 woman was a worker, but she tended to the field, she bought in the market, she had a business. It was there in scripture. But now the saying is, a woman at home is be a keeper of a home, which God points out because he wants that. He said that was a good. He said it's a good thing. He didn't say it was
Yeah.
bad, and it really made a difference because the home is where the heart is,
Yeah.
and when you have the heart secure for the family to have peace, because they're saying it's true, man. We fight a lot of things out here that are against us. Even being married is adversity. Even as singles, it's very adversity. A lot of adversity out here, especially dealing with
Mm-hmm.
people against what you believe, and also jobs that may have some type of attitude towards you. Those are the things we battle as men, but men don't want to come home to chaos or better yet, an empty house where she's not back after like 10 p.m. at work, where she's like working as much as you. It's like, we really just need a nurturing woman more than a provider. Because
Mm-hmm.
think about it, it wasn't like until before equality came, it wasn't the issue that we needed providing for more money. It's just because the saying is true. A woman's money is her money. It's not our money. We're just paying 100% everything. Men are traditionally paying for everything. We're not paying 50 or 75 or 80, 20, 100, if the case be, if you have the money. But I think this leads to my next question. With everybody speaking their mind in these times, what do you think about with which I want to say this, and when I walk on very thin ice when I say this, um, what's the decline of what makes people, well, how can I say this? What has been some challenges you've seen? And you don't have to give details, but what challenges you've seen with counseling with certain couples have you seen that been like kind of like why does this person act like this compared to others? Can you give us an understanding about that?
Yeah. I mean, is there something specific that you would be wanting to see addressed, Moses?
Yes, some like let's say a lady saying that she can't take it no more, but she hasn't never had therapy or even gone to counseling for the relationship, not even once, but she's ready to give up.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that. Have you dealt with those kind of situations?
Yeah. Every day.
I believe it.
Welcome to my world, Moses.
I believe it. I believe it.
Let me break it down to you this way. So there's a
Okay.
couple of ways for me to answer this. The common myth is that sex, drugs, and finances break up marriage,
Yes.
and it's not true. It's a
Mm,
complete lie.
okay.
So sex, drugs, and finances, they're just a mirror of what's really not well underneath the hood.
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
It's just a mirror image again. Okay. What really truly kills and breaks marriages is pride.
Oh, pride kills. We just had a sermon this Sunday recently about that. Yeah.
That's the only thing. Because everything can be broken down to that, right? So somebody not wanting to do counseling, that's pride, right? Somebody
Ego.
not wanting to learn how to manage their thoughts and their beliefs, or at the very least, question it, that's pride.
Yeah.
Somebody not wanting to forgive, pride. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Um, a desire to want to argue and defend my position, pride. So all of these things are pride, right? Even the desires of like how we define love is very full of pride. It's a conditional based love, right? This is why people don't understand marriage and the beauty of it, because we've lost the sacredness of marriage. We just view marriage as a transactional process. So it's kind of like, if you do X, Y, and Z for me, I'll love you. But if you don't, I'll measure what you've done and I'll reciprocate based on that value proposition. Right. So if you brought to me, like if you've loved me 50% energy wise, then okay, I'm going to love you back 50% energy wise. Right. It's very transactional. It's what I say, and I do say this on purpose to shock people, but that kind of approaching relationship, or that kind of definition of love, is what I call prostitution.
Oh man, they're not ready for that one. They're probably like flipping the table, like Rocky said what? Oh my gosh, just throwing the phone across the room. Like, oh man,
But it's
that's
true,
pretty
because
realistic. It's
because think
realistic.
about it, like prostitution isn't about sex. Prostitution is about a transaction of my needs first. I
Wow.
don't care about your needs.
Yes.
Make sense? So I will pay you this. You take care of my needs. I don't care about yours. Don't even tell me about your day. I don't care if you're sad. Don't care if you've been left alone. Don't care if you don't have friends. just take care of my needs.
Wow.
That's essentially what prostitution is. Well, we've
Yes,
done
it
the
is.
same thing within our marriage, right? We're treating each other in the same transactional way. We get to a place where we're so prideful, so full of ego, so self-centered and selfish that we're like, hey, I don't care. You just love me the way that I demand it. And from there, I'll see if I want to love you back.
Wow. Yeah, that does sound about right.
Make
Man,
sense?
that's a mouthful. I mean, I got to sit back and think about that one. That's a lot. I mean, prostitution and selfish pride. That's oh man, this is a good one. This is good. I got to say, this is very good, Rocky, because I never heard it explained like that. That's such a good analogy. And wow, how long did you know this? Because this is a lot of information to know one time.
Yeah, you just, when you're in my field, you start to pick this up.
Yeah.
And one of the frameworks, in fact, for me, the only way that I can define people what unconditional love is actually through 1 Corinthians 13, verses 4-8.
Okay.
It's really the only way, because anything outside of that, we're typically defining that measure of love from a transactional process.
Okay.
So what you'll find in 1 Corinthians 13, 4-8 is this dialogue between God and us. And so think about the way that it's structured. So in verse 4, it's kind of like love is patient, love is kind, right?
Yeah.
So imagine that as our discussion. You and
Right.
I sitting out, we're having some burgers, and we're like, dude, like, how do I love my wife, man, unconditionally? And how do I love her with patience and kindness? And you're like, I don't know, dude, you're the one that's married. Like, what are you asking me for? And we're bantering on this thing. Well, Jesus comes walking by and he says, what are you guys talking about? And you and I go, well, we're just wondering, like, how do we love a person with patience and kindness? And so what does Jesus respond? Well, by not being self-seeking, by not being arrogant, by being kind.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a prescription in those 4 verses of what that is,
Yeah.
right? In the next series, it's like essentially, how do you love somebody with honor, right?
Right.
Well, don't be easily angered. There's a prescription there, right? In the next stanza, it's like, well, how do I love somebody with truth, right? Well, you love this person by not quitting, by not giving up,
Right.
by
Wow.
having hope,
Mm.
by not stopping loving them, regardless of what you feel.
Wow. Yeah, that's a hard one to know. People don't want to hear that. That's it, I think, when we said earlier that the 70-80% of marriages filed divorces by mostly women. Men don't technically, they don't usually leave a lot of marriages. They don't usually file a lot. They want to fight to the end, and unless there's a situation, it's a rare case, for men to file. I think a lot of people miss the point that you know there's no system, there's nobody like Jesus. We're not Jesus, and I had to say it like that to make it clear, because we're not going to be perfected to be exactly like Christ, that we're clean of everything. But I do believe we do need to give grace and mercy. And
Yeah,
who are all listening and watching, please understand, I'm not condoning cheating. I'm not saying he cheats, accept everything. But I think you should back away, separate, and see what the problem is, and why is my husband, why is my wife acting like this, and figure out what is the cause of it, versus just walking away. Because it's so easy to give up. And it's like, it's funny. It's not easy to just break a family. That is heartbreaking. I've seen people in my family do that. And that is such a hard thing to see, because the kids are affected so much. It's like dividing identity between both mom and dad with the child. Why am I not here with dad? Or why am I not here with mom? That is effective to the child, especially today's in our country. We have a high rate of single mothers, and that is a problem. And it affects the communities for a lot of people that bring the children. What are your thoughts on
absolutely.
that? Yeah.
Well, let me nuance that stat about
Yeah.
women being the highest rate of filing for divorces. I
Okay.
think the statistic is correct, but I don't think that people who are quoting that I've seen on social media, I don't think they're actually throwing a whole picture to that process.
Yeah.
So statistically, yes, women are filing for divorce, okay, at a higher rate. The problem is that men are checking out at
Yeah.
equally a
Yeah.
higher rate.
Yeah.
So just because we're not the ones initiating the divorce doesn't mean that we were not the catalyst also, or partly responsible in creating the demise of this marriage. We
Yeah.
checked out. So
That's
for men, whether we're Christian or not, we've got to man up. We got to
man up.
stop getting checked out. We got to stop making excuses that, oh, they're just wanting this and that. Well, they're crying out with a need, but we're unwilling to hear it.
Absolutely.
And that's our part as men, is that we've got to also get our work done so that we could show up better as men, not less and not checked out. Make sense?
Right.
So the
Yes, sir.
goal for us is to become better men, better husbands. Our teachers are our wives. They will teach us how to do that if we're open to hearing and learning. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
it is, the stat is correct. It's just that it's not the full picture, because on the other side, we as men, we have to be accountable for our choices and actions as well. Let's put it this way. In the 60s, we would always talk about the man cave, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like basically a room, a basement suite, and the guy gets to put his bar or decorate it the way that he wants, or his TV. That was the man cave. What's the modern day man cave? Work.
Work. Yeah.
So what do? When we're in a disagreement with our wife and we feel uncomfortable, what do? We go to our man cave. We stay at work longer. We don't want to go home. Why? Because we don't want to actually deal with our junk and have the love and patience to walk our spouses through what they're struggling with. We're
Yeah.
giving up as men.
Absolutely. Wow.
So that's the complete picture through that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a quote I put on Twitter saying, a woman's purpose to connect the man's mind to his heart, and the man's purpose to connect the woman's heart to her mind. Because you said like the lady is like kind of like a teacher in some areas, because emotionally we're not fully more emotional, we're more logical in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we seek the logical way where their femininity is free flowing, femininity is being, masculinity is doing. We're doing
Mm-hmm.
things. So with that being said, sometimes we in our minds as men, we're kind of high in our minds and our logic. Sometimes, you know, we have to, woman could take us out of our logic and get our imaginations running for some things. We need to get out of our logic sometimes. For women, their mind might be high in emotion, but sometimes the logic will bring them down to ground. Keep them grounded so they don't feel so high in the sky with the emotions. So there's a balance there, which is true, which I think the man has the responsibility to cover her and protect her, because that is a man's purpose, is to lead as Christ led the church, you know, and it's such a big purposeful thing to know. We have to be very understanding, because I know the Bible says, men, be understanding of your wives, because she is the weaker vessel. I'm not against women. People they might say misogynistic, but that's not me. I think the problem is we hear these talking points on social media, YouTube, etc. But the thing is, God does want the men of God to remember that the woman is the weaker vessel. Be understanding in all things of her, because there's some things that women do that, you know, we have to keep watch on, because sometimes we have to be gentle in a way where we have to understand versus, oh, you don't do it the right way, you're so dumb or something like that, which is, you know, it's not necessary to say that. It's just she didn't know. She just trying to please the husband or family and be the best mother and wife she can be. It's just that men have to be a little bit understanding and more merciful, because we need that too, you know? Just how God is merciful to all of us and giving us all grace, you know?
Well, and let me bring this around to like how we first started this process.
Yeah.
What I had brought up was the idea that what we lack in our marriages is the understanding that I come with a set of fears and insecurities already.
Yes.
So does my wife. So really, when you ask me the question, what can couples do to actually improve or be prepared for marriage? It's actually to just understand that whatever you get triggered with is already inside of you. It doesn't come from your spouse.
That's true.
You understand? Because the reality is that my feelings are embodied within my being. I can't share my feeling. I can't take my emotion out and give it to you. We can hold the same category of emotion, so we can both be sad. But why you're sad and why I'm sad are completely different reasons. So I can't really share my emotions. So if I'm feeling something, that's in me. My wife didn't create that. At best, what she did was trigger that. So how we can improve on this is recognizing that we actually all have fears. That I'm either going to get triggered to feeling I'm not enough, or I'm going to get triggered in feeling that I'm too much. These are my two polar fears that I'm going to play with, all of us. And on this side of heaven, we'll be playing with it forever. There's no way to remove that, because as long as ego is present with us, we'll be struggling with these dualities. Make
Right.
sense? So
Yes.
my job in preparing for a marriage would then just be to recognize that I have this fear. Right. And if my wife could prepare herself to recognize that she has those fears, then as we trigger each other, we'll automatically give grace to each other by simply owning what we've done to create this moment. Right. Or a better way to say it is that we could own how we both co-created this moment.
Wow. That makes perfect sense. I agree. It's hard to believe. Many don't hear this a lot.
Mhm.
I think it's even worse in the church where we had a sermon Sunday. My pastor spoke about we have a higher rate of abortion in the church more than the world, and I
Yeah.
thought that was pretty interesting. I didn't even know that till Sunday, so I thought that was pretty funny how we have a lot of statistics higher, even divorce in the church, but we don't seek to well, we seek to speak on things, but of course, we need to speak more on improving the people within it that are not married and get them corrected so they can prepare. Because I think there's a lot of unrealistic expectations that is having people single still. And personally, Rocky, I don't believe no one's called to singleness. I really don't believe that.
Mhm.
I don't believe nobody's a nun because it's not even in the Bible. I just don't believe it. And I know Catholics say that, but I don't believe that whole saying because somebody in this time that we're in, this era, wants somebody and they want a family. I don't think no one's an island. It doesn't make any sense to me when I see that. But what do you think about this next question I'm about to ask is what have you learned being in a relationship so far as your own self married?
Yeah. Everything that I just shared.
That's good, buddy.
Like
I like
literally
that.
in real time,
Yes,
right?
sir.
I'm living it out in real time. And it's very true. Everything that I've shared is a very pragmatic process of how we actually engage um each other in relationships, right? So even outside of the realm of marriage, if we just strip it down to a process of building friendship, building community, right? This process of connection needs trust. It needs vulnerability to take that process. And it needs my willingness to own how I co created what I'm feeling and what that result is that I'm ending up with. So if I'm wanting a deeper friendship with you, Moses, I have to man up on where I'm not showing up as a friend for you. Right. So if
Yes.
I'm offended by you, I have to own the difference between what took place versus what I believe took place. There's a distinction there. And if I can't see that, then I'll always blame you. So then all that I get as a result is less than what I wanted, which was a deep friendship. Well, that same concept applies into my marriage, right? In our marriage, is that if I don't see that I co-created what I feel or what I'm going through with my wife right now, then I mean, I'm going to shut off and I'm going to rob myself of the ability to show up as a husband because I'm going to react, right, in my fear. I'm also going to hide myself away from my wife. I'm not going to allow her to experience all of who I am when she has every right to experience all of who I am. And so this is the tension that we have, is that when we don't take responsibility for that and we don't own it, we don't see it, we don't have the tools to help us articulate what a need is versus an emotion. Now we're struggling in communication. So we can't help but default back to our natural thing, which is you're my enemy.
Mm,
And we're not, right? The number one rule I give to couples is your partner at best is trying to tell you they want to get close to you. They're
right.
just doing a horrible job saying it. So your partner might have been running to you and yelling at the top of her lungs or the top of his lungs. She's still trying to say, I just want to get close to you. I just don't know how to say it because I'm freaking out in my own fear.
Yeah, fear.
Make
Yeah.
sense? But because I don't understand that dynamic, I can't help but get triggered in my own fear. Now I'm going to react back to her.
Wow. It's funny when you say fear. I think one thing we believers understand, the Bible says very clear, love casts out fear.
That's right.
That is such a prevalent thing that many forget that they need to have from the love of God, because you can't have the 9 fruits without one. Is the first fruit is love. It's the foundation, because without love, you can't have joy. Without joy, you can't have peace. Without peace, you can't have faithfulness, and etc. One can't exist without the other.
Yeah.
So with that being said, for someone to want a successful marriage, they have to know those fruits of the Spirit through the Holy Spirit that gives you those fruits, to walk in that daily. To have the love of God, you have to have love and have fear out of your heart of everything that you believe that you went through. Because there's some people that went through some horrible upbringing, and I get that. I don't discard anyone's past, what they went through, despite being a Christian or not. Those things we go through in life is something we learn from, that because we know it's not our only experience, but it's something that we went through, but we don't let it define us. Either you're married or divorced or remarried, etc. The thing is, we got to understand that love has to cancel out that fear for things that we don't know, because I think there's a lot of fear in people, even in the singles, that don't understand this relationship is such a big deal for your future, because you could end up sabotaging your relationship, and it can happen.
Well, let's talk about that verse. I love that verse. So just before that line that says love casts out all fear, it's perfect love casts out all fear, right? So if you actually look into the Greek, that whole sentence, that whole verse, its context is that love already is perfected. It needs no adjustments. It doesn't need an upgrade. It doesn't need to be fixed. There's no add-ons that need to be placed onto it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So every time we feel in our fear that this love is imperfect, I'm trying to fix it. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah.
Right? We were so busy trying to fix it. Oh my God, I can't believe she's overreacting. So we try and fix it. Right? What's showing up there is that however we're showing up in love, we're already believing it's not enough.
Yeah, right.
That's why our fear is there. So if I'm open to just seeing that and just pausing for a moment, all I need to ask myself is, what do I need from my partner right now? And if I'm open to just being still and asking that question, and even asking my partner that question, it'll get resolved. And it'll get resolved because in that moment, love did show up perfect. I didn't try to fix it. I created a space for two people to be able to experience and share, this is what I need, and this is how I would need to experience it.
Yeah, no, that's about right. Rocky, it makes sense. I don't have no complaints with what you're saying. It's just been on the money since the beginning of the show. It's pretty practical. We have to understand the foundation and get that corrected before we consider anybody. Even when, because it says that men are pursuers of the women we pursue for a relationship. And I think there's a saying that's true, which is very, very understandable. Women hold the access to sex and men hold the access to marriage.
Sure.
Yeah, and many don't know that, we don't see a lot of women proposing, but men are always the one proposing for a reason. They choose who their spouse is when he asks them, through their, well, of course, the fathers first, but then them afterwards. But we tend to see that a lot of people are not looking at, you got to do that inner work. You got to. And if you don't have a detox period, I think everybody should have a detox in their life at some point of what past they went through, because sometimes those bad relationships can give you a resurface of your mind to think, well, how's the saying goes? It reminded you of what you went through with your other relationships. And I've always asked ladies, how many good relationships you had? They always say less. They never say more. So I'm like, why haven't you done the work to know what made you pick the same person? Different name, same personality, and it never ceased to amaze me, Rocky, that um, we have an influctuation of more singles in America that have not sat back and said, you know what, I'm not ready for no marriage. I need to sit back. I need to get right. I need to see therapists, which is nothing wrong. I think
Yep.
Christians who say no to therapy, I disagree with them. You
Hmm.
have to see therapists because sometimes we kind of put too much on the pastor. You know, the pastor is not your therapist for everything.
Yeah,
You have to remember he has his life too,
that's
which
right.
is spiritual. He teaches the word as a teacher, but he cannot change your triggers that you pray for only because you ask for prayer. He
Yeah,
prays, but he's not going to change everything. You
yeah,
have to seek that understanding through a professional therapist.
yeah,
I prefer Christian therapists because they have understanding of what that is, but they give you the understanding what those triggers to help you understand how to cope with it and understand how to handle it. So if it comes up in the relationship, you know what it is. So you don't have to react and let that change you for the person to think this person's trying to harm me because there's so many different personalities I've seen who haven't done that inner work that just
yeah,
think I'm just who I am. It's
yeah,
like, no, you're not. That is something in you that needs to get checked out
yeah,
before you consider any man because you will destroy that person,
yeah.
you know?
Both men and women need this process because
Absolutely.
without that, all we're doing is just bringing in our junk, and what is going on is that we're just projecting it.
Yes.
Does that make sense? And I see this happen in married couples that break up and divorce, and then they go and they remarry, and all they're really doing is they're looking for the opposite shadow of the person that they were just married with. So
Yeah.
nothing's changed. They think it's a better person, but really in reality, all they found is just the opposite shadow of what their partner had. So it's the same thing. The conditions are the same. It's just polar differences.
Wow. Yeah. It's polarity too. You have to, I think like the saying is true. You have to if you don't understand what's the hurt, you're gonna hurt somebody through that past hurt still. It has to stop because it's a cycle, right?
Yeah.
You know, it could be family issues like the parents, like there is an unresolved issue with the mother or better yet the father. Because
Hmm.
that's where resentment really comes. You know, I think that really has a big difference in boys and girls growing up, you know. Um go
So,
ahead.
yes. So judgment's a little bit different. So like when we talk about bitterness, right, and resentment, that process is typically created through judgments that we make.
Yeah.
And um, the reality is that we will make judgments with the person that we spend the most time with. So if I spend the most time with growing up is my mom, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
have more judgments towards her.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I spent less time with my father, even though he was in the picture, I have less judgments towards him. So what I want to do is, as I'm growing up as an adult, is become aware of where I've held judgments with my mom or dad or even their marriage. Because whatever that is, that's going to be repeated within my marriage.
That makes sense. I totally understand that. That's hard to believe. People don't know that. You know, you could blame the mother for what you look in the man for what she didn't get right from her husband. And
Mhm.
that could blame him, whoever that man you're choosing, and say, you're like my father. I don't want this kind of person. Where it's like that man has no idea who you are. How
Yeah.
is he that guy? You know?
Mhm.
So that's good you put in that perspective. I like that, Rocky. It's just definitely a hopeful understanding that people could see this conversation can help somebody out there, you
Yeah.
know. And this is the next question. What advice would you give someone considering a relationship in 2023?
Probably no different than what we've talked about already.
Yeah.
I would say if you're single, probably the best relationship advice is really to get clear with what you need in a marriage, not who you want. You want to get that really clear first.
Yeah.
Um, there are a lot of different processes that you can go. I do have my own profiling system that helps singles identify that in a clear way so that it can be helpful. Just going to any counselor and therapist and talking about your fears, that will help you profile that as well. So that's number one for singles. For couples, I would say definitely go into premarital counseling. So find a really great counselor, therapist, or relationship coach that actually will hold your feet to the fire. So in other words, these should be people that they already see how you're playing in your shadows and they're not going to let you just slide right by and deflect. That they'll hold you to that place and help you see it. Because if you can see it before you get married, all the stuff that you start to work on in your marriage, it'll become a lot easier. It won't be as daunting. If you're already married, you should, if you're about 7 years into your marriage, you should definitely go and get a check-in with a counselor, therapist, or relationship coach. I do typically see a pattern of 7 years.
7
And I
years.
find that every 7 years, couples who don't spend that time to work on themselves or go to a workshop or spend some time to go even deeper within themselves, they keep repeating that pattern. So if you're within that 5 to 7 year mark in your marriage, go get some help right now. Like help
Like a
people.
tune-up.
Yeah, get a tune-up. If you're in the 7 to 8, you definitely really want to go get a tune-up, right? And if you haven't at all, definitely make a point to go do that right now, right? Before your next 7 years. And we typically call it a 7-year itch. I don't. I just think that there's just something within that 7-year cycle that we really struggle with. And there's something that inside of us we're wanting more, but we feel stuck. And to me, that's the sign of like, hey, you haven't done enough work to help you move to the next stage of life. And so when I think about marriage as a totality, what we try to do is we think marriage and the wedding is the same thing. They're not. So the wedding is just a really expensive party, a lot more expensive than a normal party. And all that was distinctive about it was that there were vows that were articulated in front of people to each other. That's the wedding. The marriage, that's the lifestyle.
Right.
Make sense? So what we want to do is not ride out what I was like when I first got married and get complacent. What we want to do is begin to understand that every year I have to bring some measure of growth and improvement within myself so that the next year I'm ready for what's available to me. So think of it like an arcade game. I'll end with this.
Okay.
It's the idea that, when we play an arcade game and we want to get to the next stage, we have to get some sort of tool or key that enables us to be successful at the next stage, right? Kind of like Mario Brothers kind of a thing, right?
Right.
Well, marriage is no different. I cannot think or at all believe that what I was like, right, 10, 15 years ago is sufficient for what my marriage is going to be like next year.
Right.
It's not. Because next year is a whole new set of problems, whole new set of complex, equations that are coming in, that who I am now is not going to be sufficient for that. So much like a business has to know its trajectory and make adjustments and make improvements on what it's going to be next year and begin to do that this year. Same thing with your marriage. We have to begin to see like, hey, I want to be this kind of a man next year. What do I need to do this year to see that come into play for next year? Right? If you want to be a certain kind of a woman next year in your marriage, well, what do you need to do right now? What needs to come into place? What tools, skill sets, or courses or workshops that you need to invest yourself into that would allow you to be that woman that you want to be next year in your marriage? That's the journey.
Awesome. No, that's a good way to put that end of that. So we'll get to the end. So I know we're talking about this relationship topic in mind, but what's one? I think just one advice you can just say, and then we'll go to final thoughts. Would you suggest to people who are on the fence they're about commitment, but just like, what would you suggest to the people who are on the fence about commitment, but who would just rather just sleep around? I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what are your thoughts on that question?
Yeah.
What would you suggest to people who are on the fence?
Oh, this is such a beautiful question. I'm so glad you asked it. So there's two ways that I have to answer this. So people who are non-committal are not necessarily the same people that are actually just sleeping around. These are almost like two different kinds of animals, and that's why I want to address it separately. So let me speak to the committal ones first. If you're on the fence about committing to a person, you really want to get that checked out. And I think what it is that in our Western world, we've so over glamorized the idea that I don't need anybody. Like, I'm just so good. I'm so self-sufficient. I don't need anybody to complete me. It's just not true. So it's wonderful that we can arrive at a place where we're really great and we fully accept who we are, but it's playing safe.
Exactly.
Playing on your own, that's playing safe.
Yeah.
The
Play
real
safe.
growth is when I'm actually able to trust and work with somebody that reflects back to me how horribly I'm showing up, and I make those adjustments. That's where that real growth comes in. So if
Yeah.
you're non-committal, man, unless there's some really horrible reasons why you shouldn't commit, you got to dive in. You got to commit, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's just the next stage, right? It doesn't have to be marriage, but maybe you're just dating and you've been dating for a year or 2 years. Why are you not calling each other boyfriend and girlfriend? Right? Or maybe you're at boyfriend and girlfriend stage and you keep putting off engagement. Why are you not having that conversation? Why are you playing it safe? So figure out a way to understand what are you doing to get in how do I say this? What are you doing to get in your own way of having what you want in life? Right. So
Right.
stop making excuses. Now, if you're the kind of people that you're sleeping around, here's what I would say to this is that the more you sleep around, the more you're going to struggle with actually connecting with somebody deeper. Right. So it's what we would call pair bonding. Right.
Right.
So the
Yeah.
more we give of ourselves by sleeping around, it's kind of like watching more porn. And
Oh,
what happens is if I'm watching more porn, I am training my my psyche inside my cognitive brain. I'm training it for the dopamine hits.
wow.
So pretty soon, even the porn itself isn't turning me on. I'm
That's scary.
needing more to get that dopamine hit. Does that make sense? Because I'm
Mhm.
numbing myself to that dopamine hit. Make sense?
It does.
So when I sleep around, it's the same effect. It's no different. I'm just numbing myself. I'm not really having an engaged relationship with anybody. I'm just pursuing it for a dopamine hit. I'm avoiding what I'm afraid of by sleeping with somebody else. So my suggestion and invite to those people is stop. If you really, really want to be held and held in such a loving way, you've got to stop going for the dopamine hit. You got to stop asking yourself, you got to start asking yourself, what am I doing to hold myself back or get in my own way of truly being loved by somebody?
Wow.
You got to go in that direction.
Right. Wow. You got me getting a little glossy eye over here, man. It's just I feel for those people who don't understand that's hurting them for the person they should be with that want them for the right reasons that's out there
Yes.
versus the ones who want to use you, and it's sad. It's really sad when I see that because it makes me wonder if they knew this, would they stop? And if they understood it, would they continue?
Yeah.
And it hurts. It breaks my heart when I see that
Yeah.
for the young and the old, that it's just not the way to go. It's really destroying them internally, and it makes them not able to pair bond, like you said, to have that bond with one person that should have that only.
Yeah.
The more you lose it, the less you'll bond with one person. It's like you'll be more promiscuous, but then you won't be able to be faithful, you know?
Yeah, I mean, if you strip all of that terminology out of the way, all that's going on is that we're chasing a high and we're thinking that it's love.
Yes.
That's the confusing part.
Yes.
We're yearning for love, but we're so transfixed in our Western culture about
Mhm.
sensuality and sexuality. Make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah.
That's the misalignment. And so if we keep moving through relationships really quickly, all we're really doing is we're saying, I don't want to risk getting hurt anymore. So I'd rather just have a dopamine hit than
Wow.
actually truly experience deep, meaningful love that brings transformation to my heart and soul.
Wow. Wow, guys, this is like the most powerful episode I've done in my life. Um, wow, I'm gonna be sharing this with everybody because you really hit the nail on the head tonight. And despite me being sick, I don't feel sick talking about this with you. I feel empowered because
Mm,
I'll keep it short and simple, and I'll be real honest. I'm a divorcee. I've only been with
mm,
one woman, and I was a virgin when I met my ex. And that was 7 months of relationship. But the thing is, it should have ended in annulment, of course, but the person didn't want annulment. It should have been out
Right.
the system, but it is what it is, divorce. The thing is, I knew something was wrong with that bouncing around. It just, something about that really bothered me. Even before I was a God-fearing man for Jesus Christ, it made me realize being safe for marriage is the better way, no matter how much I feel or despite the temptation for pornography. That stuff really changes your brain. It does, and it
Yeah.
does affect you for a long time. That's why guys struggle with that the most, and ladies too. But it hits the men the most, and it makes men become these type of savages that they shouldn't be. That makes them, see a woman more than just sex. And
Mhm.
it's life is not meant to be like that, and it's not the way to live. It's like, that's how many kids start coming. That's how kids start getting created, and they don't come here to be asking to be here. you know
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's the reality we're seeing. But that's something I'm really gotta be thankful to tell you. Thank you for speaking on that, and
Mm.
we'll go move to the last part, for your time. What are your final thoughts on this topic in mind, dealing with relationships in 2023, Rocky?
I don't know if I could really add any more out in this space other than what we've covered. I think we've covered a whole lot for
A lot.
relationships in 2023. I think, man, if I could summarize it in one simple thing, it's I would have to say that marriage is really truly magical and special,
It
and it's
is.
so worth it.
Yeah.
Despite all the fears that we all have with regards to commitment and all the legalities around marriage and things like that, but I can't see of a better way for a man and a woman to find healing, to be
Yes.
made whole, to truly experience what unconditional love is outside of how we typically position it, which is very conditional. It's really the place to discover that. And I find that if we could understand that process, this is the nucleus of where community is built, right? It starts within the structure of my family and we expand on that. And as a church, we don't really value that in the same sacred way anymore, right?
Wow.
We're struggling with the same process within our church. So it's a wonder why the world doesn't understand it anymore either. We've not set the bar for it. We've not
and and
modeled it.
and also why men are leaving too. They're leaving the
Mhm.
church more often because they don't trust it, that it's not there. It's like we can't
Yeah.
get leadership here because we feel like we're more shunned to be men, but now the pastor is more the man than the men of the church. So there's a power struggle for one man that's powered, and he's not seeing the other men as valuable to make them seem like they're valuable men. There's just, you're not me, so you have to be a pastor. You have to be under me to know if you're really a man. And most women look at the pastor as the man. You know?
Well, I would say that what happens is when we see that scenario,
Yeah.
women are just reflecting what they're
Yes.
not getting in terms of their needs being met.
Yes.
That's all it is.
Hmm.
So, as men, if we can begin to understand that, we won't have to play off of our own insecurities to fight against that. But that means that as men, we need to hold each other with tremendous love and grace, and to be willing to speak things out into the space that we see. So the accountability isn't about condemnation. It's just about, hey, brother, like I see where you're at, and there's
Mm.
a gap there.
Yes.
And if you're open to it, I'd love to walk you through that process instead of leaving you on your own vices to try and figure things out.
Right.
That's what we don't have.
Exactly. Absolutely. So we're coming down to the end of the show. One thing I'd like to do, especially if there's a similar faith background where we're both
Mhm.
talking, I firmly believe, if the believer I'm speaking to is more of a mature believer, because I think you're more mature than me. I was 18 when I got born again, and I'm 30. I would like to end this with a prayer. Would you be willing to pray to close us out, if that's
Yeah.
possible?
Yeah, would love
Please,
that.
please, thank you,
Absolutely.
thank you, Mr. Rafi.
Well, Lord, I just thank you so much for this time with Moses. And what a wonderful name that you have given him. Um, I see within him the qualities and the characteristics of the Moses within the scriptures that we read. A man who's wanting to chart new territory, who's wanting to part the confusion aside so that he could actually bring clarity to people where truth resides, where hope resides, where love resides. So, Father, I ask that you would bless Moses. I ask that you would bring into his life somebody that would be really special, that's just for him in his next stage of life. And for the singles out there that are listening to Moses's channel, I pray that they would also begin to have an awakening deep inside them of something deeper than just a dopamine hit, that they would pursue after a deep love that, Father, can only be found by giving of themselves, by yielding into a relationship with someone that loves them. For the couples that are out there that are listening to Moses's channel, I pray for them that they would find hope of knowing that where they're at, no matter how bad it may look, there is hope through this. You can heal. You can come to the other side of the very things that you want in your marriage. It will take work, but it is so worth it. So seek help. I pray that the right men and women in counselors and therapists and relationship coaches, wherever you are, where you are listening, that they would fall into your lap, that doors would open for you to run into these gifted people that you are surrounded with, where you can get support and help. So, Father, thank you so much for your goodness. Thank you for connecting Moses and I up together. What a blessing this night has been. So, Father, we bless you, we honor you, we worship you, Lord Jesus. Thank you so much for all that you pour into us, the wisdom that you give, and the grace that you connect us with. We pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Rocky. I appreciate this time, and you got the waterworks going over here. So thank you. Thank you for speaking on this, and I just hope everybody out there that enjoyed the show, please sure to follow Rocky and also check out the Clarity Coaching. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, so it's claritycoach.ca. You'll find all my information there.
Gotcha. I'll put it in the description, guys. Please check out Rocky and follow his social. And also, please reach out to some of your thoughts on this episode. And please give me your thoughts and what do you think about the show. And also, book a session with Rocky. I think he's worth it. Rocky is a hardworking man. He has a family too. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if you guys see me in the coaching session with Rocky. Because Rocky, he really touched on some things that I really appreciate. And being in Texas, it's not easy when you're seeing a lot of things out here. So I'm from Minnesota originally, but it's different out here. But I just want to say, guys, thank you for listening to this show. And I hope you guys come to the next episode. Peace and blessings. Catch you on the next episode. Moses out.
All right.